Okay. All right. Well, good evening, everybody. This is Patrick from the Poison Pen Bookstore in Scottsdale, Arizona. And I'm delighted to have my friend Caitlin Rother with me this evening to talk about her brand new novel, Hooked. Hey, Caitlin, great to see you.
To you too. Thanks for having me back.
Yeah, it's funny. I was looking at the
I know
interesting
they're
how
different.
the design changed slightly.
The waves are opposite. Did you notice? And so
Yeah.
and so is the direction of the. Well, here's why. I think they decided that they wanted it to be more menacing, but then there's a sequel. See, so
Oh,
Staged is the next one that comes out in June, and so you'll they have them slanted differently, so that looks like a
I
series,
see.
right?
Well, that's cool. So Staged comes out in June, you said?
Yeah, and the cool thing is, I'm skipping way ahead, but this is Wind and Sea. So that's where our surfing detective his home away from home is Wind and Sea. So I gave them some photos of Wind and Sea, and there's a little shack right here, which is an iconic little shack made out of palm fronds. It's been there since 1942. It's been knocked down by waves a million times, and there's this local surf group that always rebuilds it.
Oh,
There's a
so
lot of lore that
that
goes
is a
on with
real
Wind and
place.
Sea. It's a real place, yeah. And so this is an illustration, but it's basically the perspective of looking up from the beach because we have the wave in the first book. So now they're going the other direction into the neighborhood, into where all the wealthy people live.
Gotcha. Now, so I just wanted to, you're known primarily, at least thus far, for all of your, award-winning true crime that you've done over the years. And how many books have you done now? 16?
So Hooked is number 16, Staged is number 17. And then
Okay.
there's a couple more that I've already written that are waiting under submission. And I'm up to 19, but they're not all published yet.
Wow, very cool. And so most recent true crime
Yes.
is about the McStay family case. And Caitlin was here and did an event for this. We had a great discussion. What else do we have here? Got all your
Oh,
Death
cool. Death
on
on Ocean
Ocean
Boulevard.
Boulevard.
Everyone loves that book.
It's irresistible case, isn't it?
Was it suicide or was it murder?
I don't know.
That book
I
is still
didn't.
selling like more than the other books, even though it's 5 years old now. People always want that book. They just keep buying it, which is great. I'm not complaining, but it's one of those cases that really bugs people. It
Yeah,
really, really bugs people that the sheriff's department didn't come up with a ruling that they agree with. I'll put it that way.
right, right. And then I've got the
Body
reissue of
parts,
Body
yes.
Parts. And what a terrific book on Charles Manson.
Oh, thank you.
I wasn't really aware of it until you were here last time and we got to talking about Manson and it's really terrific, Caitlin.
You. Well,
So,
you know what's funny is the book that I'm working on right now, which is a novel. It's actually about a cult, and I'm very much inspiring one of the characters. He is actually inspired by Charles Manson.
is that right?
Yeah, so it should be an interesting. It's fiction, but I had Charles
Contemporary?
Manson and all that research that I did very much in the forefront of my mind as I've been writing this book.
Yeah. Well, let's talk a little bit about Hooked. Very,
Okay,
very exciting. Yeah, tell me a little bit about, it's set in, if memory serves, 2015. Is that right?
that's correct.
Yeah. Why did you set it at that particular time?
Okay, so my first novel is called Naked Addiction, which I don't have right here to hold up, which I should have thought of this. But my one and only novel before this was called Naked Addiction, and it is the prequel to this series. It has the same detective, Ken Goode, but it does not have the new investigative reporter Katrina Chopin character. So that's why this is a new series. The prequel came out in 2007, and it took me 17 years to get published.
Wow.
Hooked was supposed to be the sequel to that book. So, in its original form, um, it was going to be the next book. And then I was going to bring up this new character, this new female character, but I couldn't get it published. So the editor that published Naked Addiction said I took too long to do it, which wasn't true. But basically, I had to go through another, I don't know, 3 agents. I wrote, a dozen true crime books. So basically, I had to catch up. My forensic material, my police procedural knowledge and ability, and wasn't there. And I think that's probably why it didn't get published earlier. So that book came out in 2007, and I think it was sort of set in like real time. So I figured, okay, I'm going to have Hooked come out. It's going to be 1 year later than Naked Addiction. So really would have been 2008, but I'm fudging it. So I put it in 2015 because I wanted it to be a tribute to old school journalism. And I wanted it to be at a time when we still had newsrooms. And so 2015 was, and also technologically, the newsroom has to exist because there has to be a lot of action, and people, these newsrooms don't exist anymore, but there were these big open fish bowls, and you would have glass offices around the edges where the editors' offices were. We used to call them glass holes for the editors' offices. So you could literally see people arguing or on the phone, or whether they were angry or whether they were asleep on their desk or what, seriously, there was a woman who had, I think, narcolepsy, and she literally would fall asleep at her desk. Or if you would see some people coming into the editor's office who were meeting with them, and you're kind of like, why is he kissing those people's butts? We're supposed to be covering them, and it's like they're looking pretty jolly in there. So it was like a giant place where you could just watch everything that was going on, and everybody could watch each other. You could hear each other's conversations, each other's interviews. And I wanted to have people remember that, like when we watch the Watergate movie, whatever that's called, The Paper. And, that gets me so excited when I watch that movie. I'm like, yeah, it was so great to be a reporter. That's kind of what I was hoping that people would feel as they were reading my Katrina Chopin character, that she was a good person. There's none of this fake news nonsense, none of this disinformation, misinformation, partisan, nonsense, posing as journalism. So 2015 seemed like a good year. And it was right in the transition when they were moving into web first journalism, which is important because when I started in journalism, we didn't have the internet stories. And when you have a deadline that has to go online, you have a completely different time frame for your amount of reporting you can do before it has to be turned into your editor. So that makes a big difference in terms of how certain scenes were written, and most of how the book was written. So I had to kind of balance some of those things. And I wasn't actually working anymore as a reporter in 2015. So I had to call my friends who were still at the paper and ask them, what was it like? What was the deadline? Did you guys still have, in the old days, we had like 8 editions, from all the different small bureaus, right? So anyway, there was a lot of stuff that went into that. So I picked 2015 because it was right in that transition period of web first, because that was important for a lot of the times that Katrina would get her story online, and it comes out the paper still the next morning, but it's already out at like 9:00, 9:15. And so, the police who are waiting to see what she's got, because they don't know what this person told her, they can read her story, and then it affects their investigation, and they get upset, heads will roll, because they don't like the way she said something. Anyway, it was all kind of timed to that period.
Right. So, I mean, nowadays it's just almost instantaneous, right? I mean,
yeah, and there's no copy editors anymore. And so that's why there's so many typos and very few editors. Like you might have one editor who'll read it before it'll go online. So it's very, very small skeletal staffs now. A lot of people still are working at home because they went home during COVID and they got rid of the newsroom, where they got a much smaller newsroom, and people don't have desks anymore. They work from home. So it's a completely different. If I said it today, it wouldn't be the same. So that's
seems
why
like that.
I needed it to be back then, so you could still feel the dynamic of the newsroom and the way that it was, and the size of
Imagine
the
everybody
staff.
kind of fed off each other's energy too.
Yes, exactly. Especially when there was a big story,
Yeah, definitely.
like a shooting. I mean, I remember when we had the first school shootings, there were two in a row that happened here in San Diego, Santana and Granite Hills, and they went, they were national news and they were some of the early ones. And I remember covering one or both of those. And I ended up, that was some of my early narrative work too, that I was crafting scenes minute by minute of what happened and where was the killer, where was the shooter, what were the kids doing, were they hiding under the desks or in the closet? And so that was my early scene writing, and I did it in the newspaper before I was writing books.
When was your kind of your heyday in the newsroom? Was this in the 90s or?
I went to journalism school and got a master's degree from Northwestern in I got my master's in 1987. So it was a
Okay.
long time ago. And then I started working I had an internship at a news service, political news service in Washington, D.C. And it was like way over my head. I was like way too young to be doing that kind of stuff. So I went to a little tiny paper in the middle of nowhere, Massachusetts. And then I kind of just had to work my way back up to the bigger papers because that's what you used to have to do. You'd have to go to the middle of nowhere, which is what my character does. She goes to the middle of nowhere and she works her way back up to the big paper.
Right. And yeah, I mean, one of the things I wanted to ask you just right off the bat. I mean, there are elements of you in both of these characters, right? I
Yes,
mean,
that's
it's
true. Yes.
interesting composite.
I had
Um,
a friend who read this book and she's like, I feel like I'm reading your life story. I'm like, she's not me, though. She's not me. Trust me. I mean, if I had an agent say, she can't be you, because she has to have flaws and I'm perfect, so you can't, I couldn't possibly. No, I'm kidding. But anyway, I mean, you can't have real people. I mean, I want them to be realistic. And I give her some of my feelings and some of my experiences, and I give her my ethics and my values. But she takes a lot of risks. I don't know that I would take the kind of risks that she takes. Um, and
some of the
she's
biographical
fearless. She's
some of the
fearless.
biographical stuff. Yeah.
Yeah,
With
I definitely, I mean, my partner and I talked about this. I've had a lot of stuff happen to me, a lot of trauma and a lot of crazy stuff, and I've got a lot of stories. But I thought, I don't really want to write a memoir. I'd really rather just write fiction and give this stuff to different characters, and that way
right,
nobody will really know what's real and what isn't real. Because I mean, I have a lot of material, you know, and I can give it to the men too. And I mean, I definitely spread it around. She is not me, but she definitely has to be part of me because she's an investigative reporter, and
sure.
clearly, I've got to give her my experiences. It won't be believable otherwise. Otherwise, she'll be a
Right.
shell. She'll be a cartoon, right? So.
Mm. Well, and then Ken, some of his backstory aligns with yours, right? I mean, La Jolla.
Yep, definitely. He grew up kind of like I did, in La Jolla, at La Jolla High, with parents who weren't wealthy, surrounded with a bunch of wealthy kids from wealthy families who were, not all of them, but they're a bunch of jerks I had to go to school with, because their parents had money and they were spoiled and they had cars and they'd drive a Mercedes to school, kinds of stuff. The stuff that I had to grow up with. And I didn't have any money. We didn't have money. My parents worked at the university, and
Yeah.
that was hard. So, I gave that to him. And I gave him the love of the ocean, which is, that's not too personal, but when I left California when I left San Diego to go to school, I literally went down to Windansea, this beach where it says home away from home. It was mine too. And I literally had to say goodbye to the ocean. I put my foot in and it was like a part of me. So I gave that love of the ocean to him because that's real.
Are you a surfer too?
I'm not a surfer. I'm a swimmer.
You're a swimmer.
Yeah. And I've almost drowned numerous times to be pulled out by lifeguards. And he
Right.
is like this gnarly surfer who surfs, 25-foot waves. So, I mean, that's definitely not me. So I
Now,
gave them both this risk taking these characters, because that's part of what they're drawn to, why they're drawn to each other.
so I mean, she's an investigative reporter. He's
Right.
a homicide detective.
Right.
And it's interesting how in the book we learn that there's a lot of shared skills between those two disciplines.
Exactly.
If you wanted to talk about, they're both, I mean, she's looking for the story, that's paramount in her world is getting the story and investigating. Sorry about that. This customer's getting in the way.
I know.
Um,
I just had to turn my heater off because I'm dying in here. So I was on my phone turning my heater off.
but talk about that. Yeah, I mean, they're both but the different aspects of investigative skills that they share, and that
Well,
sometimes are conflict with each other as well.
right. Okay. So when you have a reporter and you have a detective, in this case, they meet each other at the beginning of the book at a bar and they're immediately attracted to each other. And they start chatting and they immediately start sharing some pretty personal stuff because they don't know that they're ever going to see each other again. And they both find out that they're orphans, essentially. So her parents, who were two federal judges, were assassinated essentially in their driveway. And 6 months before that, her brother, her fraternal twin brother, um, was found dead of an overdose, and she believes that he was murdered as well. So that's part of the reason why she comes back to San Diego is because she wants to light a fire under the San Diego PD and get them to, get back on this cold case. And she wants to find out what happened to her brother. And so they're talking about a shared history because his mother killed herself when he was only 6 years old. And she actually brought him with her in a car, and they pulled over to the side of the bridge, the Coronado Bridge, where there actually is no shoulder. So you're really not allowed to stop there. But she pulled over and she took her heels off and put him in the driver's seat. And she walked behind the car and he didn't know where she went. And she literally climbed over the railing and jumped off the bridge. And he's sitting there waiting for her to come back. He's 6 years old, and a police officer pulls up and says, "Where's your parents?" And he says, doesn't know. So that's when he decided to become a police officer. But they both have this apparent suicide common history. So they start sharing that. And then he gets a call and it's two dead bodies in La Jolla Farms. I got to go. So he gets her phone number on a napkin and he goes, "I'm going to call you. Don't worry, I'm busy, but I'm going to call you." And she goes, "I know."
Mhm.
And so the next morning, after he's been processing the scene all night, he sees her with her little notebook after the news conference and he goes, "You're a reporter?" And she says, "Yeah." So now they can't date because when you have a reporter and a detective who are working on the same case, you're not allowed to cross that line. You're not allowed to date your sources when you're a reporter. And when you're a detective, you're not supposed to be sharing information with the evil media, right? So he's getting pressure from his boss, and she's got this line that's already drawn in the sand that she knows she's not allowed to date him. So there's that professional competition where they're both trying to get information and solve this case. So that's a source of conflict and tension throughout the book. And then there's also this romantic sexual tension between them that they have to kind of battle until one night they get very close to crossing that line. So I wanted them to be similar, but they're not the same person, obviously, because they're man and woman, but they approach the job differently, partly because they have to. He gets access to evidence that she doesn't have access to, and she gets access to people who she interviews who won't talk to the cops or won't open up to the cops. And so he's always trying to get information from her and she's always trying to get information from him, and they're following each other secretly, and he's reading her stories and she's asking him questions that he won't answer, and so he keeps trying to go off the record and she's like, "I got to be on the record." And so it's that's real. But yeah, they both are investigators and they both are trying to solve this mystery.
Well, it's kind of an interesting narrative choice that you made with having them. We get two different versions of events sometimes, we'll get it, and that's kind of a risky move to do. I thought you really pulled it off because it
Thank
shows
you.
you what's happening as the story's moving forward. And talk about that
Did
technique.
you ever watch, there was a limited series, I think it was called The Affair.
I'm
I
not
I
sure.
actually thought about that series when I was writing this, although I wrote this before I actually saw the affair, but they would do that. They would have a man give, and they would have the point of view of the man and what happened through his eyes. And then they would go to the female perspective and it would be totally different. Even
Right.
though, and there would be like a slight little bit of overlap with some dialogue maybe, but it was so different because men and women don't see things happening in the same way, obviously. And I also tried to not have duplication, which was a little tricky, but I wanted you to get really just different perspectives on what just happened. And I continue to do that in the series, because I think that's interesting. Just that we are so different, sometimes that like we overlap and we feel like we have a lot in common, but we sometimes just see things very differently. And so as a woman trying to write that, I had to put myself into a man's perspective. And so, it's not as easy as you might think. And that's why I was saying, sometimes I'll read a male author trying to write a female character. And unless you have a good beta reader, that person may not be fleshed out. So I took great care to make sure that was different and unique, unique perspectives from both sides.
Now, was The Awakening a big book for you?
I did not read that. What's that?
Kate Chopin?
No, no. But I purposely didn't call her Kate. I purposely called her Katrina because I didn't want there to be any confusion with the real person. I did know that there was an author called Kate Chopin. Yes.
Yeah.
Katrina was the name I was going to name my daughter if I ever had one.
Oh, really?
And I also liked the comparison with the hurricane,
Sure. Absolutely.
She was a storm. And her mother was a storm too.
Yeah. Yeah. Um, I was going to ask you a little bit about, I mean, I like the title because it's one of those good titles that does double or triple duty,
Right.
because,
That was the hope. Yes.
yeah, I mean,
That was
underneath
not the
there's,
original title, but yes, go ahead.
oh, really?
Yeah, so the original title was called Dopamine Flood because there is a drug that I made up in this book, a sexual enhancement drug, which is basically it works on your dopamine receptors. And the idea of the drug, the premise of the drug is that, you've got people who are in a long-term relationship and you want to, revitalize and prolong your relationship, keep people together. It basically, this drug does not exist. I made it up, but the idea is that it basically recreates that feeling of attraction and infatuation when you first meet somebody. That's caused by dopamine. And so I wanted to have that in the title because I felt like, I felt like people know enough about the phones that we're addicted to phones because every time we pick up the phone, that's a dopamine reward
Oh, absolutely.
system. And it's totally about dopamine. I figured people were conversant enough and familiar enough with that term that would be fine, but they thought it was too scientific and they didn't like I called it dopamine fix. I'm sorry, dopamine fix. It was originally called Flood, but I changed it to Fix. They didn't like that. They thought that sounded like an illicit drug. And so we ended up with Hooked, which was still my idea. But because if you don't come up with your own title when they don't like your first one,
Yeah.
they're going to give you one that they want. And so I just kept feeding them titles until I found one that they liked. So that's how we came up with Hooked.
I think it's a good title, really good
Thank
title,
you.
and we'll talk a little bit about, I mean, because addiction definitely plays a role in this book in multiple different ways. Um,
And the
talk about that a
series
little.
too.
Yeah, where is there a personal not necessarily you yourself, but I mean, writing about people that have
Yes.
addicts and family stuff, maybe?
Well, as I mentioned, the prequel is called Naked Addiction. In
Yeah.
that book, every character is addicted to something. So for Good, he's addicted to caffeine and damaged women. And so he has this history of these women, he either falls for them or they chase him and he just keeps having these issues with these women. And so he just decides, I'm just done with women. So that's if you don't really know that so much when you read this book, but that's the backstory. And Katrina Chopin has a different backstory where she was using sex in an unhealthy way because she had this family history of Huntington's disease, and she didn't want to get close to somebody, and then they're going to want to have a committed relationship and have kids, and she doesn't want to take a chance of passing that gene on because that's a horrible disease, right? So she basically would have sex with people and then, break it off. And so
Hmm.
she's going through this whole period of celibacy herself because she's seeing a therapist and she's just trying to be more healthy. So that's how they meet, when they're both coming out of this celibacy period. So I do explain that. But the addiction part, her brother, as I mentioned, he was found dead and they thought it was an overdose. He was an addict and an alcoholic, and he was in a treatment program with the very first victim that's found dead in this
Victoria.
book. Her name is Victoria. She is the daughter of this guy who's developing this sex drug. And so the two of them work at this company, this biotech company that's developing this sex drug. And so she is found upstairs in a bedroom, and her father, Simon Fontaine, is found down on the patio. And she's got, there are these pill vials that are open. And so right away, it looks like she might have overdosed as well, right? So Ken Goode is not sure, is this a double suicide, a double homicide, a murder suicide? He's not really sure what happened because the evidence is screwy and it doesn't make sense. It looks like things have been
She
moved
seems
and
to
things are.
have some tracks on her arm, right?
She had some bruises in
Yeah.
her elbow. Yeah. And so, but they still looked weird. They didn't look
Hmm.
right for somebody who was supposed to know how to shoot up. And there was, no syringes. So, um, and that actually all came from, that was inspired by my first true crime book, Poisoned Love, because Kristen Rossum staged a suicide scene when she killed her husband. And she did the same thing. Like, so she ends up sedating him and then giving him fentanyl, but there's nothing in the room that they can figure out what's in his body or what killed him. And
Mm.
they do eventually find this toxicology that it was fentanyl, but there was no syringe, there was no patches, there was nothing in the bedroom to give them a clue that that was what killed him, or how it killed him, or how much of it, or what form of the drug. So I kind of I'm always pulling from my true crime cases when I'm writing
Of
fiction
course.
now. So this was a stage scene, and as the next book is called, Staged, there's going to be some more funky looking death scenes in the next book too.
Well, people forget that fentanyl, which is now like the just killing people all over the place,
Right.
was first a legitimate hospital
Yeah, at the
medication. You
time,
mentioned the patches; they were fentanyl patches.
exactly.
Yeah,
So when Kristen Rossum did this to her husband, you couldn't get fentanyl. It wasn't available like it is now. And so the only way that it was available would have been in a hospital, in a
hmm,
controlled setting, or in the toxicology lab where they were about to start implementing a whole testing system. So they had this little vial of fentanyl citrate that she logged in and out, and it was in the toxicology lab. And that would have been enough to kill 10 people. It was like 10 milligrams, and it was empty. So they eventually figured out, well, maybe she put that in his drink or something, and left the
right.
vial. So um, that's how she probably staged it. And there were also patches missing when they did an audit. They had fentanyl patches, which are for cancer patients. There were
Yep.
15 patches missing. So she could have put patches all over him, also put some fentanyl in his soup and then put him in bed. I don't know.
Right.
Yeah.
So when our at the beginning of the book, when Ken arrives on the scene and they discover these two bodies, at first they're not sure what relation they are to each other. They're
Right.
not sure if she's like his young trophy wife
Right.
or
Which
what.
is normal in La Jolla.
Yeah,
There's a lot of older men and younger women, who are on their second, third marriage and they want a younger version. And so that's kind of where this is all going with this sex drug. Is like he designed it thinking that he could market it to people who are in long-term relationships and to Christian, partnerships, Christian marriages where they want to stay together for their whole life, right? So this would help them, right? Theoretically. But it turns out that all these old white rich men down at the beach club, they can't wait for this drug to come out because they're thinking, I want to go get me a younger model.
That's right.
And their wives are thinking that too, by the way. So
Right. Right. Now, I
I didn't
shouldn't give.
really answer your addiction question fully. I think,
Yeah, tell me more.
yeah. So, yes, I do have a family history of both suicide and addiction. I was married to someone who was an alcoholic, and I got some of this, some of this information that I used in the book when I had Katrina's brother and Victoria, who is the first victim, and then also her publishers, Katrina's publishers, newspaper publisher's son, Alex. The three of them were in a program together, a rehab program. And the parents were in a family treatment group. So that's something that I actually did with my husband when he was going through treatment, that you go with the person who's in treatment and they bring their spouse or their parent or their daughter or whoever is, whatever it is. And you're all in a room and you guys all talk and you kind of hash out some feelings about what's going on. And so I did
Yeah.
that. And I got to be the poster girl spokesperson for the program. Like the guy who ran the program kept using me as a way to sell the program to everybody because I was an articulate person. And so anyway,
Is it like Al-Anon or?
no, it was like a paid outpatient program. But as part of that, rather than an Al-Anon group where you're not really supposed to crosstalk, you can share, but then you're supposed to sit down and shut up. This is more of a discussion group where you're allowed to talk
I
back and
see.
forth. Yeah, that's the difference. So yeah, so I have personal and professional history and knowledge of addiction and suicide that I've written books about. So because Kristen Rossum also, by the way, she was a meth addict as
Yeah.
well. So
So, okay, so as this homicide investigation starts to take off, and they're both kind of working the case. I don't know how much you really want to give away.
yeah, not too
Um,
much, but yeah.
Not too much, but talk about it. It looked like it must have been a lot of fun to write, but also kind of challenging, because they're kind of circling around each other in various different ways.
Mm-hmm.
There's a lot of romantic tension here, and I kept
That was
waiting.
fun.
I
The
kept
fun
waiting
part
for
was,
them. Go
sorry.
ahead. I was just going to say, I kept waiting for somebody to sample this drug, and there to be some like wild sex scene.
I'm not sure. Didn't I mention that there was some that was stolen from the lab? I have written 4 in this series, so I'm trying to remember if I'm in the right book. There's some stolen from the lab, right?
I Do we
They
really
put
want to hear?
cameras into the lab and they saw somebody taking some of the
Yes,
drug out of, right? Okay.
yeah.
This
We
is
don't want
this
to give
book,
too
not
much
the
away.
next book. Because book number 4, when that finally gets published, the drug finally hits the market. And so it's
Awesome.
actually everybody gets to take it legally, but then mayhem ensues.
I
So
would.
because, people think more is better when more is not better.
I love it when
So
that kind
yeah,
of thing backfires too.
so I'm
They're
sort of circling back with the whole addiction theme in book 4. That's like full blown. So we'll see what happens. I'm going to publish it regardless of whether this editor decides she wants to publish it or not, because it's important to me. So, but yeah, it's an interesting drug. So I forgot what your question was now.
no, I was just talking about as the investigation kind of continues and how they're maneuvering around each
Oh,
other.
right, right, right. Yeah, that was fun. I put them into places where I could really picture very easily where they were, like ground them in a geographical place that I was really familiar with. So like I would have them meet someplace. Like there's a Starbucks, a specific Starbucks that I have her going to, and then Goode and his sergeant walk in. And so they have this little, meeting. And then he goes off down the street with his sergeant, and she follows them to this building, be far enough behind that they don't see her following. And then after that, she goes to meet somebody for lunch at Mr. A's, which is right one block up from that Starbucks. So it's a real restaurant, and so is the Starbucks. It's a historic place. You go up there and you get to watch the planes come in. So I have a whole scene set there as well. And he goes to spy on her to see who she's meeting for lunch, right? So they're kind of tracking each other because they're both trying to see what the other one's got. And you do that as a reporter. You always have to track your competitor with the competing media outlet. Sure. Although in the old days, we would have more than one paper that we would have to compete with. Later, when those other papers went away, then you're competing with TV. And they're copying your stuff out of the newspaper because they just aren't on top of things as much as the newspaper people are. So you're all tracking each other. So I was used to that. So I gave that to these two because they are competing. And so he sees her having lunch with somebody. He's like, oh, that's no problem. I've already talked to him. Well, it turns out this guy didn't want to tell the detective much. So he gives her all kinds of information the next morning or that evening. All this stuff is in her story and makes the chief really mad. And so that's kind of how it goes. Like it's one-upsmanship, so.
And meanwhile, there's she has a threat on her,
right.
That harkens back to her backstory, which probably shouldn't say too much about that.
Well, I'll just say that too that came out of my own background as well. But really? And I went back and forth with, well, I'll just tell you quickly the story that really happened. And then I don't remember exactly how much I ended up putting in the book, but I had somebody leave me, I don't know if you want to call it a death threat, but it wasn't nice. It was like this whispery thing on my cell phone after I wrote a series of pretty negative stories about this guy. And it just, and the person who left the message whispered, but they had an accent. And the person I had been writing about was this Iranian guy who was also kind of friends and tied up with this very wealthy Mexican businessman who had some shady deals going on. It was investigated by the SEC, could have been some cartel affiliations, whatever. The voice on my cell phone had an accent, and I couldn't tell, was it Iranian or was it Mexican? But it was an accent, and it whispered, I know where you live. I followed you home. I'm following you to work. You better watch your back. And so I had that stalker person in mind when I was writing this stalker character that was going after Katrina, but I don't think she gets that message. I don't think I ended up using it. I put it in, I took it out, I put it in, I took it out. But this backstory that does end up being in a little, she came from another paper where she had been writing about the Polish mafia who's in the trash business. And she had written about some corrupt scheme with the school superintendent and this trash company with some contract that was funky. And anyway, the superintendent was going through some divorce, and his wife leaked the contract to Katrina, and she wrote these stories. And then this woman was murdered, and her eyeballs were gouged out and everything. So anyway, Katrina had written all these stories, and there was some guy sitting outside her bedroom, and there was a gun, pointed at her window, and there was this orange light of a cigar, inside this dark
the Polish
car. Yeah.
Got to be some jokes there, Caitlin.
Well, back where I used to work, there was a very strong Polish community, and some of them were in the trash business. I'm just creating all this stuff out of stuff that I've reported on and lived through. And so anyway, I had her go through all that. So when she gets this rock that is put through her window and hooked, And there's a message, a note that's left there that's a threatening note. So instead of leaving her a voicemail, I decided to do it in a note. And the note is crafted from these little cutout pieces of magazine, letters. So just like a ransom note would be. So you don't know, so you don't have any handwriting. And it's the same sort of thing, like you need to stop writing about this. And so she's not sure if that's related to the story she's writing on these biotech deaths, or is this the same stalker that was pointing a gun at her window back in Northampton, because there's a trial coming up, and they're thinking that she's going to testify for the prosecution, even though she said she's not going to. So she's not sure who's stalking her. Anyway, that's kind of a long story, but I
Backstory.
also had her living in Northampton, where I also worked as a reporter. So I gave her that as well, because it's easier for me to picture things, if I put it in some place that I know well.
Of course. Yeah. What's interesting is that lately the subject of stalking has come up with various writers,
Oh,
and just about their own personal experiences with it.
oh, really? Mm-hmm.
Because now it's, as you know, if you're in the public eye at all, um, even as a writer, um, you are expected to be much more accessible to your readers. I mean, it's just part of the world that we're in.
Yeah,
You can reach out directly, through social media often.
I know.
And I won't say who it was, but there was a woman who was talking about how sometimes that can backfire, because when you're out on tour, people can fairly easily follow where you're going,
That's
and
true. Yeah, I
it's
always
pretty
wonder about
terrifying.
how much I should say about where I'm going, or if I should just do it once I'm there, I do think about that. Because like I said, I did have that stalker, and the creepy thing about it was it got me in trouble at work, and I won't go into details, but I couldn't get my paper to really take it very seriously, and I ended up making some calls to find out what had happened that day. Could it be the guy that I was writing about, or was it someone working for him, or was it someone else? Because I didn't know who it was. I couldn't recognize the voice because it was a whisper. And I ended up having calling the police myself, because I didn't feel like I was being protected by my own newspaper. And that
Wow.
got them very upset. And then the next thing you know, I'm on the phone with the chief of staff for the mayor, and I'm trying to find, because he was the one who appointed this guy. And I'm like, what happened today? Did he go crazy today? I mean, did something happen? Because I'm trying to figure out why I got this threat, right? And the next thing you know, I'm getting in trouble for supposedly, seeking special favors from the mayor's office or whatever. When I wasn't, I was calling up to try to find out what happened that day, but then it just blew up in my face and turned into a bad political thing. So that's very much firmly in my mind. So when you see all this stuff about corruption and the politics that creep into this case and
Yeah.
continue to do that throughout this series, it's coming from my personal experience in the news business, stuff that I went through myself. And like I said, it's just better for me to put it in fiction and change the circumstances, because I definitely remember all of that very strongly, and it was very upsetting to go through all that.
So what's the timeline of the series? Is it starting, this book is 2015. Is it just going to pick up exactly where it
Yeah,
leaves
so
off?
Staged picks up. I mean, Hooked takes a week from beginning to end. Staged picks up right where it leaves off.
Okay.
And so it'll go through, part of 2016. And then book 3, which my editor is hopefully reading right now and deciding that she wants to buy, I do skip ahead a little, and then book 4 has to skip ahead because the FDA approval process for a drug, I mean, I can't make that up. I can't rush that. I had to make that somewhat believable. So, and things have to happen, so that's why I put a year between Naked Addiction and Hooked, even though they're not technically part of the same series. It's the same character, and I've already written certain things that are out there. I can't change those. That's in the public domain. So
Is that
I
book
sort of
still
just kind of had
available?
to pace this, huh?
Is Naked Addiction still available in any
Yes, it
form?
is. It's
It
still
is.
available. Through Wild Blue Press.
Okay. We had a couple people ask that online if that they could still
Oh
get that.
yeah, no, please buy it. In fact, I just rewrote the sales page for that to say that it's a sequel, a prequel to this series, that and hopefully more people will buy it. Because when I'm doing private events, people are buying it up because they want to know more
Of
about Ken
course.
Goode. So that's cool. Hey, buy the book. It's only been a million years since I wrote it. you know,
Right. Right.
that
I
was
got
my
to ask you
baby.
a couple.
That was my baby. Yeah, go ahead.
I have to ask you a couple of true crime questions.
Okay, sure.
Um, I mean, the obvious question I'm sure you get asked, what's the difference between writing true crime and fiction? But it is an irresistible question, because I'm sure there is some crossover between the two.
Well, I don't know what everyone else would say, but I'll tell you how I write my books. I use fiction storytelling techniques when I write a narrative nonfiction book. So the storytelling is really not that different. It's just that one is true and one is not true. Literally. I mean, and I have more leeway and more freedom to, I can make things up. Right. And so with true crime, I can't make things up. I don't make anything up. I don't exaggerate. I don't create. I don't embellish. I barely even interpret. I am very much of a purist. I was just talking to some other true crime writers.
You don't take a position, which I kind of respect, but also
Yeah, and
like,
that varies too. So I mean, that's my personal choice because I've been trained as a journalist to not take a position. I just decided to carry that over into being an author because you know what? I just feel like with some of these cases, it's not as important in some of the other books, but in like my last two books, there's no winning if I take a position. I mean, politically and with some of these law enforcement agencies or these DA's offices, if I ever want to work again
yeah,
as
right.
a true crime writer, it's just better for me to not have an opinion. Even and to be honest, with Death on Ocean Boulevard and the Rebecca Zahau case, people are like, "Well, what do you think? Did she kill herself or was she murdered?" And I'm like, "I don't even know." And the same thing with Down to the Bone.
Hmm.
Um, did Chase Merritt kill him? Did they get the right guy? I said, I don't know who killed that family, honestly, because there were so many flaws in those investigations and there were so many holes in the prosecution's case. I don't know. I don't know. And so I feel like that is number one, safer, but number two, it's really true. I mean, I'm not making that up. I don't know. I really don't know. And that's different from some of my other true crime books where I feel pretty confident that they got the right person. But I still kind of don't want to go there because it's not my job to be an advocate. It's not my job to say, oh, they definitely, got the right person and they're evil. Sometimes they're mentally ill. And then we have to have that
Yeah.
whole discussion because the prosecution is like, they're evil, they're evil. And I'm like, I don't even want to go there either because that's, again,
Yeah.
not something that I'm going to end up winning or. So I just find that it's easier that way and it's keeps me feeling cleaner and it's safer. With fiction, I don't have that problem. I don't have that issue. And you can ask me a question and, you know, so like this book that I'm writing right now, I'm having a really interesting time with this. And this has happened as I've been writing it. Like I didn't set out with this premise in mind, but remember I said I was writing this thing about a cult and he's
Yeah.
inspired by Charles Manson.
Right.
I decided that the premise of this book is going to kind of leave it as an open question. Is he a predator or is he a healer? And so you're going to go through this book and it's going to be this ambiguous thing where it's not going to be black and white. It's not going to be me bashing you over the head with this person is the killer or is the bad guy or is doing something definitely wrong. There are characters who say that, but what do I think? I'm purposely keeping it ambiguous because I think that's more interesting.
Definitely.
So there's that too. I mean, I've always been of the mind to make my characters, whether it's true crime or not, my characters, even when they're real, are not black and white. Nobody who's a victim is all good, and nobody who's a convicted killer is all bad
Yeah. I
because
mean,
that's not
sometimes
real. That's not
Some
real.
sometimes you'll see writers who will take a position and you can tell that it's somewhere along the line they blur the objectivity or they make the
They
solution
don't even
fit.
try to be objective. There are some people that I've seen that are just so full on, oh, they absolutely positively did it and they're evil and they're bad, they're this, they're that. And that's their choice. I'm not going to be judgmental about it.
Yeah,
That's their choice.
yeah. Or somebody who gets too close to their subject.
There's
Do you
that
see
too.
that?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that can happen, but I always try to be careful. But like I used to teach journalism, and my students would say, and I sometimes get this even, when I'm talking about a true crime book. Well, didn't you confront him? Didn't you say, oh, you're a liar? And I said, no, I didn't. Because you're not going to get them to talk to you that way, and you're not going to get them to share anything with you. You have to get them to trust you. It doesn't mean that you shouldn't lie to them, in fact. And there are some people who will lie and misrepresent themselves and cozy up, like this Michael Wolf guy, what he
Hmm.
did with Epstein. That's just wrong. Are you familiar with what I'm talking about?
Yes. And
Okay. And he cozied right up to him, and he's like helping him, with what to say to defend himself. I mean, ethically, that's
there's something
very
there's
not
something
good.
about that there's something about that dude that kind of rubs me the wrong way.
Yeah.
Like I'll
He's,
watch the Daily Beast and he'll be on there all the time and it's just like, okay.
and I don't do that. And I do not conduct myself in private in a way that is going to come out later. I always get nervous though, when I'm talking to somebody on the phone, like in prison, because they record all those calls. And I'm like, are they going to think that I'm, like that? Because I try to be really careful with what I say. But when you're dealing with a killer in real life, um, they want to corrupt you. They want to pull you over to their side and see, can I compromise this person? I mean, they're trying to do that.
Hello,
So
Clarice.
exactly. It's just like
Yeah.
it's very tricky. You have to decide what kind of person you are. And Michael Wolff decided that he's going to do whatever he has to do to get his story. And I'd always try to be careful with that. So I am going to
Well,
judge him, but I'm not going to judge everyone
yeah.
else.
I mean, it's just keeping the story going. You know what I mean? There's a
Yeah.
certain amount of exploitation there just to
Yeah.
keep yourself talking about it.
And did you ever see that movie about the making of In Cold Blood? They had a movie about Truman Capote and how he did it,
Yeah, I
and
think
and I
so.
was disgusted by that because that's exactly what he did. He exploited that guy, had sex with him, he paid him money, he paid the warden to get in there. I mean, I was just like, this is gross, this is
Yeah.
disgusting, and I didn't even want to read the book after that. And I tried to read the book. I'm like, this isn't true crime. He made all this up.
Hmm.
And I'm like,
Yeah.
oh, Truman Capote, Truman Capote. I'm like, no.
Yeah.
So I have a
Um,
strong sense of ethics. I really do. And so I gave that to my character. And not in a preachy way. I don't want to be like a preachy, super goody two shoes because I make her take lots of risks and, she'll do what she needs to do to get the story too. But again, there are certain lines that I just don't think you should cross. And I wanted my character to not cross those lines. And so my agent was like, well, she can't be you. And I'm like, well, but I think it's important that for people to respect her as a person, as a character. I want I want her to not do those things because I wouldn't do it either, but I want them, even if she's separate from me, I want people to respect her as a good person with integrity that conducts themselves and knows the difference between right and wrong and doesn't come out like Michael Wolff in this gray area of ethics. I don't want
hmm.
that.
But what would you say is her fatal flaw, if she has one? Because everybody's got a weakness. Or
Well, she's got a weakness for Ken Goode, that's for sure.
yeah,
And there's a scene where you can see that and they get interrupted. I don't know what would have happened if they hadn't gotten interrupted. But I made it so that they were interrupted and then they had to stop. So
so how long do you make the reader like what book? Well, you can't tell us that.
I make you kind of wait a little because like within Moonlighting, the whole point of that show was the tension, and if you give in to that, where's that tension? The tension's gone.
That's
So
true.
I had to make a choice, right? I had people say, "Well, why didn't you have them have sex?" Well, because there's a purpose for this tension. That tension is there for a reason, in a creative way. And it's also real that they're not supposed to be together for both sides. They could both lose their jobs. And with this whole stalking thing, if
Yeah.
they get into a vulnerable situation, that stalker guy could come in and kill them or whatever. So it's a real fear, it's a real risk.
So book 4 is not called Consummated.
No, but there will be some of that later. Yes. I'm
All
not going to tell
right.
you which book it's in, but yes, there is consummation.
Okay.
Eventually there is consummation.
Um, so just about true crime. What is, I mean, you've written so many books. What does a story have to have for you to say, wow, there's a book there?
Well, when I was first starting out, it was a lot easier because I hadn't written so many, and I don't want to do the same kind of story twice. So I've written like a dozen books now, and I'm having a very hard time finding one that's interesting me at this point. It's too hard, number one, logistically speaking, but I'm also just not finding one that's different and interesting enough to hold my interest and to sell books. Honestly, I mean, how many different ways can you kill a woman? Because it's oftentimes that the man's killing a woman, right? And so I
Mhm.
try to mix that up. I had one where a woman hires a man to kill a man. So I didn't want to always have a man killing a woman because that gets boring. That's all, and I don't want to be doing domestic violence because that's kind of run of the mill. I'm sorry to say that, but it is. I wanted each story to be different from all the others that I've done. And so I found one like a year ago, and it was on Dateline. And I didn't even know the case existed. So I completely missed the trial. We don't have news photographers anymore. So when I went back to look, there were like 3 news stories. So I didn't have any background. And so all of the sources that we used to have and the people who were actually in the courtroom taking pictures, this doesn't exist anymore. So it's actually
Really?
really hard for somebody like me to go back and recreate a case is what I used to do. If I didn't know about it, I could go in later and go through it and recreate it. I can't do that anymore because there's no way to do that unless I have the court transcripts, and that's super expensive. And I couldn't get anybody to cooperate with me. I made all the calls, and three people said they would cooperate, and then they wouldn't return my emails and calls. So it's like, even when I
This was
found one that I wanted to do, this was a guy who was an IVF doctor, and he ended up killing his wife. And it was very similar to that staircase. Do you remember the
oh yeah.
staircase? There was
Yes.
literally a staircase in this scene, and there's like a bunch of books and movies made about that staircase case. And this one was kind of similar, but it also had a whole other aspect of this whole IVF world. And that's how they met. And anyway, I would have probably done a book on that, but I couldn't get it. I couldn't get the people to cooperate. And it was Betty Broderick's attorney was his attorney. And he's just so busy. Couldn't get him to, I mean, I talked to him on the phone, but I couldn't get him to email me back. So I'm really happy writing fiction right now, to be honest. And
Yeah.
so I'm not sure if I will write another true crime or not. I also went after another story about a woman who was acquitted after spending 20 years in prison, and I wanted to go back and tell her story. And she decided, I think, to go with another writer, but I tried because I'm thinking, with these most recent books, I'm kind of going in that direction of social justice and cases that were not done properly by the prosecution or by law enforcement, where there
Right.
were mistakes um and corruption, purposeful, you know, withholding evidence and all kinds of bad things that they shouldn't have done, and rushing investigations, and overcharging and, all kinds of contamination of evidence and, all that stuff. So I was kind of going in that direction. And so we'll see. I mean, I'm not going to say I'm done, but it's just hard for so many reasons compared to how it used to be. And I don't have the passion for it that I used to.
Yeah. Right.
And it doesn't sell that much, so honestly. So
Really?
it doesn't really pay. No. And it's a
It's
lot of work. It's a lot of work to do it properly.
yeah.
So I'm
Because I
really
mean, right,
enjoying this fiction.
sure. I mean, right now is kind of the era of the true crime podcast and
Right.
all that stuff.
And that's where people are like, okay, well, I already know the story. I don't need to buy a book, which
I
is
see.
not true because the podcasters a lot of times read a book and then they just use your information. There's a
Right.
lot of that without giving you credit. Yeah.
Let me just see. There are some questions that have come
Yeah, sure.
in.
Go ahead.
Let's do it. Uh, ah, okay. Let's see. There was one back here. Um, sorry.
Oh,
Okay, is Naked Addiction still in print? You answered that. It is.
yes, it
Uh,
is. Please buy
uh,
it.
and then
And you can get it on Amazon.
My friend Robin makes the comment, "Aren't we all addicted to something?" I would think
Yes.
yes, totally.
Like caffeine. I like wine and I like caffeine, and I'm not really supposed to have either one. And so I'm allowing myself some green tea, but I had coffee yesterday and it just really killed me. Oh,
Really
it's
too
not
much?
just not good for me. I have issues in my, reflux and it's just and it's caffeine, and it's just not good for me. So, I used a lot of it in my life and anyway, yes. So I gave Ken Goode caffeine and he doesn't have damage winning women anymore, but he's still addicted to the coffee. So,
Did you smoke at one time in your life?
I had a relationship with somebody who smoked sometimes, and I hung out with this group of people that used to smoke at parties. And there was one year where I smoked one cigarette a day, and then I stopped. It was more just like it kind of gives you. It's kind of a weird feeling to describe, but I wasn't really a smoker, no, but
Yeah.
one cigarette a day. And then I started feeling like some asthma or something. So I'm like, no, I'm stopping with that.
Um,
So I'm not addicted. I don't get addicted to things long term. Like they're like, except for caffeine. I have a really hard time with not having caffeine because I like it. And I write so much. I need it as a writer to make me smart.
well, you're addicted to writing.
I am sometimes addicted to writing to the point where it hurts me. Yes. Because it's like I want to know what happens. And sometimes the only way that I know what happens is if I put my fingers on the keys and my keys decide what happens. And then it's like you're getting to the end of a limited series and you want to know what happens. I'm the same way when I'm at like 70,000 words in a novel. I'm like, I need to know what happens. I need to keep going so I can find out what happens because I don't know. I mean, I've plotted it, but not like to the point where I know that.
Yeah. Somebody in the comments brings up the Epstein files. I hope the Epstein files will bring down all the kings of the world involved. Good luck with that.
Well, I
Uh,
just find it very curious that we have Prince Andrew being arrested today, and we have people in different countries, they're losing their jobs, they're having to step down. And we have a president who is all he can say is I've been exonerated. I'm like, what are you talking about? Your name is in there like thousands and thousands of times. Who says you're exonerated? That's bizarre.
yeah. Yeah, it's crazy.
I mean, it just makes me laugh the way he says that. He's just decided to say it,
Yeah.
because he can't get it to stop. He can't get people to stop talking about it. No matter how hard he
He'll try to,
tries.
yeah, bomb Venezuela or do whatever he can
Iran.
to try to.
We're going after Iran now because we don't have enough distractions to get rid of the Epstein files. So he's got to go start another war.
Yeah, I think, this is when we started the discussion, I asked about, you set the book in 2015 and it was already starting maybe at that point, but
Fake news thing. Yeah.
the age of gaslighting
Yep.
and this age of, fake
Alternative
news.
facts.
And I think it's taken a tremendous toll on our collective mental health.
Absolutely.
Don't you
I
think
mean, it
so?
takes a lot of energy to not be constantly upset about all the craziness that's happening. I mean, it's actually been a little easier since they finally started releasing some of these things and some of the, and all that stuff with ICE and killing those two people in Minneapolis. I mean, that was really hard, and everyone was just so upset. Everyone. And that takes a toll on all of us with all that energy out there and all these people upset and scared. And it's hard the only way that I can keep it out is to write novels. Honestly, some people that I've talked to have not been able to function. Other writers I know, they were going to do blurbs for me, and they're like, I'm sorry, I can't focus on anything. I'm just so upset all the time, and I'm
Mm,
paralyzed, and I can't get anything done. And so I feel grateful at least that I have a way of blocking it out, but the only way I can do that is to sit there and work on my novel because
right.
that way I can focus on that and not on all this other stuff. Because otherwise all I do is read my phone and read all this crap,
It's not
and
good.
get upset.
Yeah. I mean, especially it's like something we all see in real time live on, right in front of our
I
eyes.
know.
There's this elaborate process of, you know, delegitimate or whatever the word is.
Normalizing.
Thank you. Um,
Yes, too much normalizing extreme behavior that should never be normalized.
yeah.
And the way the journalism is today versus the way it used to be, there's no more of this balanced news thing. You can't. When somebody is just lying, you can't just cover that the way that you used to.
Well, I
Can't.
mean, it's
You
all
shouldn't.
packaged. It's all packaged as entertainment. That's the problem.
Uh,
It's anyway. I can get off on a
I know
soapbox.
well, that's kind of partly why I wrote the book and how I'm marketing the book is that you can read this series and feel good about journalism at a time when we still were doing real journalism. And that's not that people are not still doing real journalism. I don't want to say that, but it's harder to do it because there aren't as many reporters, number one. So many people have been let go and left the business. We don't have enough bodies to be in the places where they used to be. That's just like at the minimum.
I have a good friend of mine is a kind of a star investigative reporter for our paper here, the Arizona Republic,
Uh-huh.
and yeah, I mean he's worked on some really important cases, and but I get kind of the inside scoop of the current state of that industry, and you know it's kind of grim.
It is grim.
I mean, you see what happened to the Washington Post. It's like
Yes.
this
Yes.
is
We were all upset about that for a week or two. Like I have a lot of journalists on all my social media feeds. So I mean it's just full of that.
yeah, yeah. Well,
Did you have any more questions for me or
not to end on a glum note. Let's um here's the brand new book called Hooked. Go out and
and
get a
here's
copy
the sequel out in June.
in June.
It's
Are
so
you going to be
fast. They're so quick
coming
between
out?
the two. Sorry?
Are you going to be coming out our way from San
Um,
Diego?
I don't know. We can
Maybe
talk about it.
we can lure you out here.
That'd be
Yeah,
fun.
yeah, definitely. Are you still singing and playing music?
I've been on this book tour. I've been on the never ending book tour for the past year. So it's been a little hard. And I had some arm injuries. My shoulder's been pretty
Mm,
messed up, and I have not been able to do as much with my arms. So not as much. But
not as
yeah,
much. Yeah. Well,
that's
you're a
what keeps me
Renaissance woman.
sane. Sorry?
Said you're a Renaissance woman.
Oh, I try to be. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, Caitlin, great talking with you.
Great talking to you too, Patrick. It's always good.
Always. Yeah. And we'll have to do something for the next book when it comes out.
That'd be great. Yes, thank you.
Excited about seeing where this relationship goes.
All right, good. Well, I will get an arc to you.
Okay.
Okay, good. Thank you
Thanks
everyone for
everybody
watching.
yeah, definitely. Have a great night,
And
Caitlin.
thanks for having me.
You
Oh,
bet.
should we tell them that you have signed copies?
Yeah, were you going to send us some the
I
book
sent
plate?
you some bookmarks. Yes. Did you get them?
No.
Oh, well, I did send them like a week ago.
Oh, really?
Yeah. In an envelope about that big.
I will find them.
Okay, good.
They're here somewhere.
I super packed them. So,
Okay.
okay.
All right. Well,
All right,
take
good.